Marcus steady, Thompson gripped the control stick of his F-16 Fighting Falcon as sweat dripped down his forehead. The cockpit felt like an oven despite the air conditioning system working overtime. Above him, the California sun blazed mercilessly as he pulled the aircraft into a sharp turn, feeling the familiar weight of gravity pressing against his body. "Come on, Thompson," crackled the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Hayes through his headset. "My grandmother could pull more GS than that. You're barely hitting 4.5. Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed the stick forward, diving the jet into a steeper maneuver. The G-force meter climbed to 5, then 5.5. His vision started to tunnel slightly at the edges, a warning sign that his body was struggling with the intense gravitational forces. 6 GS. That's it. Hayes continued his verbal assault. "The manual says these birds can handle 9. What's wrong with you, pilot?" The question stung because Marcus had heard it countless times throughout his military career. At 28 years old, he was considered physically weaker than most fighter pilots. His slender frame and quiet demeanor made him an easy target for the traditional military mindset that equated physical strength with combat effectiveness. Back on the ground at Edwards Air Force Base, Marcus climbed out of his aircraft with shaking legs. The other pilots in his squadron gathered around their jets, comparing notes and boasting about their G-force achievements. Captain Rodriguez had pulled 8 GS during his training run. Lieutenant Morrison claimed he hit 7.5 without breaking a sweat. "Hey, steady," called out Captain Jake Bulldog Peterson, using Marcus's call sign with obvious mockery. "Heard you maxed out at 6 again. Maybe you should consider transferring to cargo planes. Those big birds don't pull many GS. The group of pilots erupted in laughter. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he kept his expression neutral. He had learned long ago that reacting to their taunts only made things worse. "At least I can land without bouncing down the runway like a basketball," Marcus replied quietly, referring to Peterson's notorious hard landings. "Better a hard landing than a weak pilot," Peterson shot back. "Real fighter pilots push their limits. You play it safe like you're flying your grandmother to church." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes approached the group, his weathered face showing disapproval. "Thompson, a word." Marcus followed his commanding officer away from the other pilots. Hayes stopped near a maintenance hangar and turned to face him. "Son, I've been flying fighters for 22 years. I've seen pilots who could pull incredible GS crash and burn because they thought physical strength was everything. I've also seen pilots like you who compensate for physical limitations with superior judgment and technical skill." Marcus looked up hopefully, thinking his superior might actually be offering encouragement. However, Hayes continued, crushing that hope. "This is a combat unit. When enemy missiles are screaming toward Los Angeles, I need pilots who can push these machines to their limits. 6 GS might be acceptable for training, but in real combat, hesitation kills. Sir, with respect, I've never hesitated in combat situations during our exercises. Simulated combat," Hayes interrupted. "Big difference, Thompson. When real bullets start flying and real lives are on the line, your body's limitations could get people killed. I'm recommending you for transfer to a support role. Transport Command has an opening for someone with your technical knowledge." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Transport Command meant flying cargo planes and VIP aircraft. Important work, but not the fighter pilot career he had dreamed about since childhood. "Sir, please give me another chance. I know I can improve my G tolerance with more training." "Thompson, some things can't be trained. Your body composition, your cardiovascular system, your natural tolerance for extreme forces, these are genetic factors. You're a skilled pilot, but you're not built for air-to-air combat." That evening, Marcus sat alone in his small apartment off base, staring at a framed photo of himself graduating from flight school. His parents had been so proud that day. His father, a retired Navy mechanic, had tears in his eyes watching his son receive his pilot wings. Marcus picked up his phone and almost called his parents to tell them about the transfer recommendation. Instead, he set the phone down and walked to his bookshelf. Between technical manuals and aviation history books, he pulled out a worn copy of The Few about the Royal Air Force pilots who defended Britain during World War II. He flipped to a marked page and read about Squadron Leader Douglas Bader, who had lost both legs in a flying accident, but continued to fly combat missions with artificial limbs. The book described how Bader's disability actually gave him advantages in high-G maneuvers because he couldn't black out from blood pooling in his legs. Marcus had always been inspired by stories of underdogs who succeeded despite physical limitations. He thought about other successful pilots who weren't the strongest or fastest, but excelled through intelligence, persistence, and technical mastery. The next morning brought another training session. Marcus arrived early and spent extra time reviewing the flight plan and weather conditions. While other pilots relied on natural ability and aggressive flying, he prepared meticulously for every possible scenario. "Morning, steady," said Lieutenant Morrison with false friendliness. "Ready for another gentle ride through the sky?" Marcus ignored the comment and continued his pre-flight inspection. He checked every system twice, reviewed emergency procedures, and studied the aircraft's maintenance logs. His thoroughness often annoyed other pilots, but it had prevented several potential problems during previous flights. During the morning briefing, Hayes announced a new training exercise. "Today we're practicing intercept patterns against simulated enemy aircraft. These will be high-speed, high-G maneuvers designed to test your limits." The simulation involved defending against multiple incoming threats while maintaining formation with other friendly aircraft. It required pilots to coordinate their movements precisely while enduring extreme gravitational forces. Marcus listened carefully as Hayes explained the specific maneuvers they would practice. While other pilots seemed focused on the competitive aspects of the exercise, Marcus analyzed the tactical requirements. He noticed that the most successful intercept patterns weren't necessarily the ones requiring maximum G-force tolerance, but rather those demanding precise timing and spatial awareness. "Thompson," Hayes called out as pilots headed to their aircraft. "Remember what we discussed yesterday. This might be your last chance to prove you belong in a fighter squadron." The pressure was enormous, but Marcus felt oddly calm. He had spent the previous evening researching alternative flying techniques used by pilots with physical limitations. Some Israeli Air Force pilots, for example, had developed breathing and positioning methods that allowed them to function effectively at higher G-forces despite smaller physical statures. In the cockpit, Marcus strapped himself in and went through his customized pre-flight routine. He had modified standard procedures based on his research, incorporating breathing exercises and seat adjustments designed to optimize his body's response to gravitational stress. "Tower, this is Falcon 17 requesting clearance for training mission," he radioed. "Falcon 17, you're cleared for takeoff. Good hunting, pilot." As his F-16 accelerated down the runway, Marcus felt the familiar thrill of flight. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, and he retracted the landing gear while climbing toward the designated training altitude. "All Falcon units, this is Control," came Hayes' voice over the radio. "Begin intercept pattern Alpha. Bandits incoming from the southeast at Angels 20. The simulated enemy aircraft were actually other F-16s from a different squadron playing the role of hostile forces." Marcus could see them on his radar display as small blips moving rapidly toward their position. "Falcon 17, you're assigned to intercept track Charlie," Hayes commanded. "High speed turn to bearing 270, climb to Angels 25. Marcus pushed his throttle forward and pulled back on the stick. The aircraft responded immediately, climbing steeply while turning toward the assigned heading. The G-force built rapidly as he tightened the turn. 4 GS, 5 GS. His vision began to narrow slightly, but Marcus implemented his modified breathing technique, taking short, controlled breaths while tensing his abdominal muscles. 6 GS. The force pressed him deep into his ejection seat, but he maintained control of the aircraft. Instead of fighting the sensation, he worked with it, using precise control inputs rather than brute force. "Falcon 17 has contact," Marcus reported as the target appeared on his heads-up display. "Lock-on achieved." "Outstanding, Thompson." Hayes sounded surprised. "Maintain intercept course." The simulated enemy pilot was skilled, immediately turning hard to avoid the intercept. Marcus followed, matching each maneuver while maintaining his targeting solution. The opposing pilot pulled into a vertical climb, forcing Marcus to follow through a demanding high G turn. 7GS. Marcus felt the strain, but his preparation paid off. His modified technique allowed him to maintain consciousness and continue flying effectively. The other pilot, assuming Marcus couldn't match the maneuver, had exposed himself to a perfect attack position. Fox 2, Fox 2, Marcus called out, indicating a simulated missile launch. Bandit down. Kill confirmed. Acknowledge control. Excellent work, Falcon 1-7. But the exercise wasn't over. 2 more enemy aircraft were approaching, and Marcus's squadron mates were struggling to maintain their intercept patterns under the extreme maneuvering requirements. Falcon 1-4 is having trouble with his bandit, reported Captain Rodriguez. Need assistance. Marcus looked at his tactical display and saw Rodriguez's aircraft in a dangerous position. The simulated enemy had gained an advantage and was maneuvering for a killing shot. Control, this is 1-7 requesting permission to assist 1-4. Marcus radioed. Negative 1-7. You're assigned to Sector Charlie. 1-4 needs to handle his own bandit. Marcus watched helplessly as Rodriguez's aircraft fell further behind in the turning fight. The captain was a strong pilot who could handle extreme G-forces, but his aggressive approach was actually working against him. He was trying to overpower the enemy pilot rather than outthink him. 1-4, try reducing your turn rate and extending your energy, Marcus suggested over the radio. Your bandit is bleeding speed in those tight turns. Stay off the radio, Thompson, Hayes commanded. Each pilot handles his own engagement. Rodriguez ignored the advice and continued his high G pursuit. Within minutes, the exercise controllers declared him shot down. His aircraft was eliminated from the simulation, leaving his sector undefended. Falcon 1-3, cover 1-4 sector, Hayes ordered Peterson. But Peterson was also struggling with his assigned target. The morning exercise that was supposed to demonstrate the squadron's combat readiness was turning into a disaster. Marcus completed his assigned intercept successfully, but he could see the overall tactical situation deteriorating. Real enemy aircraft wouldn't have been so easily defeated, and the squadron's reliance on individual pilot strength rather than coordinated tactics was proving inadequate. After landing, the pilots gathered for debriefing. Hayes reviewed the exercise results with obvious disappointment. Gentlemen, that was unacceptable. 3 confirmed kills for us, but we lost 2 aircraft and failed to maintain sector coverage. In a real combat situation, enemy bombers would have gotten through our defenses. The room was silent, except for the air conditioning system humming overhead. However, Hayes continued, I want to highlight one pilot's performance. Thompson, your intercept was textbook perfect. Not only did you successfully engage your target, but you also demonstrated superior situational awareness by offering tactical advice to your squadron mates. Marcus felt surprised by the unexpected praise, but he could see the resentment in his fellow pilots' expressions. That said, Hayes added, one good performance doesn't erase fundamental limitations. Thompson, my recommendation for your transfer still stands. The brief moment of recognition evaporated. Marcus realized that no matter how well he performed, his physical limitations would always overshadow his achievements in Hayes's mind. That afternoon, Marcus received orders to report to the base medical officer for his transfer physical examination. The appointment felt like a death sentence for his fighter pilot career. Dr. Sarah Chun, a flight surgeon with 15 years of experience, reviewed Marcus's medical records while he sat on the examination table. She was known for her thorough evaluations and no-nonsense approach to pilot medical clearances. Lieutenant Thompson, your file shows consistently lower G-tolerance scores compared to your peers. Tell me about your training experiences. Marcus explained his struggles with high G maneuvers and the criticism he had received from instructors and fellow pilots. Dr. Chen listened carefully while taking notes. Have you experienced any blackouts or grayouts during flight? No, ma'am. I've learned to recognize my limits and operate within them. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's actually more important than most people realize. Pilots who push beyond their physiological limits often cause accidents. Your self-awareness is a valuable safety asset. She continued the examination, checking his cardiovascular fitness and reviewing his flight performance records in detail. Lieutenant, I'm seeing something interesting in your data. Your G-tolerance scores are lower than average, but your overall flight performance ratings are consistently above average. Your emergency procedure scores are exceptional, and you've never had a reportable incident. Yes, ma'am. I try to compensate for my physical limitations through better preparation and technique. That's exactly what good pilots do, Dr. Chen said. Some of the best combat pilots in history weren't the strongest or fastest. They were the smartest and most adaptable. Marcus felt a spark of hope, but he didn't want to get his expectations too high. However, Dr. Chun continued, military regulations are clear about G-tolerance requirements for fighter pilots. I can't change those standards based on individual circumstances. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. But, she added with a slight smile, I can recommend additional training and conditioning programs that might help you improve your tolerance. It's not guaranteed, but some pilots have seen significant improvements with specialized training. It wasn't the reprieve Marcus had hoped for, but it was better than immediate transfer to Transport Command. What kind of training? He asked. Centrifuge training, specialized breathing techniques, cardiovascular conditioning designed specifically for high-G environments. It would require several months of intensive work, and there's no guarantee of success. Marcus didn't hesitate. I'd like to try, ma'am. Dr. Chin made notes in his file. I'll speak with Lieutenant Colonel Hayes about postponing your transfer pending completion of this conditioning program. No promises, but it might give you one more chance to prove yourself. That evening, Marcus called his parents for the first time in weeks. He had been avoiding their calls because he didn't want to explain his career problems. Marcus, his mother's voice was warm and excited. We were just talking about you. Your father wants to know when you're getting promoted to captain. Hi, Mom. Things are complicated right now. He explained the situation honestly, including the transfer recommendation and the possible conditioning program. His parents listened quietly. Son, his father said finally, I spent 30 years in the Navy working on aircraft. I saw plenty of hotshot pilots who thought they were invincible. Some of the best aviators I knew were the quiet ones who did their jobs professionally and never took unnecessary risks. But, Dad, if I can't pull enough GS, I can't compete with other fighter pilots. Marcus, your job isn't to compete with other pilots. Your job is to protect people and complete missions. Sometimes the pilot who survives longest and saves the most lives is the one who knows his limitations and works within them. His mother added, We're proud of you no matter what happens. Fighter pilot or transport pilot, you're serving your country and following your dreams. After the call, Marcus felt renewed determination. He would complete the conditioning program and prove that intelligence and dedication could overcome physical limitations. The next morning brought unexpected news. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes called Marcus into his office with an unusual expression on his face. Thompson, I just received word from higher command. There's been a change in our training schedule. Marcus waited nervously for more details. Starting tomorrow, our squadron is participating in a joint training exercise with Navy and Marine Corps units. We'll be practicing defense scenarios against simulated massive air attacks. This was the kind of training that could make or break a pilot's career. Large-scale exercises often determined who received promotions and who faced reassignment. Sir, does this affect my conditioning program? The conditioning program is on hold until after the exercise. This is too important for us to operate shorthanded. Hayes leaned back in his chair and studied Marcus carefully. Thompson, I'm going to be honest with you. Your performance yesterday was impressive, but this exercise will involve the most demanding flying you've ever experienced. Multiple targets, extreme maneuvers, and coordination with units you've never worked with before. Marcus felt the familiar weight of doubt and expectation. If you can prove yourself during this exercise, I'll reconsider my transfer recommendation. But if you struggle with the high G requirements, your fighter pilot career is over. The stakes couldn't be higher. Marcus had one chance to prove that an underestimated pilot could excel when it mattered most. But he had no idea that within days, this training exercise would become terrifyingly real, and his squadron would face an actual enemy attack that would test every pilot beyond their limits. The war games were about to become an actual war. The massive joint training exercise began at dawn 3 days later. Marcus stood on the flight line watching dozens of aircraft prepare for what military commanders called Red Flag West, the most comprehensive air combat training in the world. F-16 Fighting Falcons from his squadron lined up alongside Navy F/18 Super Hornets and Marine Corps Heavy-8B Harriers. The sound of jet engines warming up created a thunderous symphony across Edwards Air Force Base. Pilots from different branches compared notes and shared nervous jokes about the challenging scenarios they would face. "Listen up, people," announced Admiral Patricia Roberts, the exercise commander. She was a legendary naval aviator with over 3,000 flight hours and combat experience in 3 different conflicts. For the next 5 days, we're simulating defense of the Los Angeles metropolitan area against a coordinated air attack. Marcus listened intently as she outlined the exercise parameters. Enemy aircraft would be played by experienced aggressor squadrons flying modified F-16s painted in foreign camouflage schemes. These pilots specialized in replicating enemy tactics and were known for their aggressive, unpredictable flying. The scenario assumes a hostile nation has launched a surprise attack using advanced fighters and bombers. Your mission is to intercept and destroy these threats before they reach population centers. The briefing room, filled with over 60 pilots, was completely silent except for the scratching of pens on notepads. Intelligence reports suggest the enemy has aircraft capable of sustained high-G maneuvering and advanced electronic warfare capabilities. This will test your limits in every possible way. Admiral Roberts' eyes swept across the assembled pilots. Some of you have never faced this level of challenge. Real combat is different from individual training flights. Your survival and mission success depend on working as a coordinated team. Marcus glanced around the room and noticed other pilots avoiding eye contact with him. His reputation as the pilot who couldn't handle extreme G-forces had spread beyond his own squadron. "Falcon Squadron will operate from Edwards," Roberts continued. "Hornet Squadron launches from Miramar. Marine units will provide close support from 29 Palms. Each group has specific sectors to defend, but you must be prepared to assist other units when circumstances require it." After the briefing, pilots dispersed to their aircraft for final preparations. Marcus spent extra time reviewing the electronic warfare procedures and emergency frequencies. Unlike other pilots who relied on quick reflexes and physical strength, he prepared for every contingency through study and planning. "Hey, steady," called Captain Peterson as he walked past Marcus's aircraft. "Try not to fall behind when things get intense. We can't wait for you to catch up." Marcus ignored the comment and continued his pre-flight inspection. He had learned that responding to Peterson's taunts only encouraged more harassment. Lieutenant Morrison joined Peterson near Marcus's aircraft. "Maybe we should request a different wingman. Someone who can actually keep up during high-speed combat." "Gentlemen, that's enough." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes approached with a stern expression. "Professional conduct is required during joint exercises. Personal conflicts stay on the ground." Peterson and Morrison walked away, but Marcus could hear them muttering complaints about being forced to fly with an inadequate pilot. Hayes waited until they were out of earshot before speaking to Marcus privately. "Thompson, I know you're facing criticism from your squadron mates. This exercise is your opportunity to prove them wrong. Sir, I won't let the squadron down. I believe you'll try your best. But remember, trying isn't always enough in combat situations. Results matter more than effort." The first day of exercises began with basic intercept patterns against single enemy aircraft. Marcus performed well, successfully engaging his assigned targets while maintaining formation with his wingmen. His modified breathing techniques allowed him to handle 6 and 7G maneuvers without losing consciousness. However, Other pilots were pulling 8 and 9 GS during their intercepts. The difference was noticeable, and exercise controllers began assigning Marcus to less demanding scenarios. Falcon 1-7, you're assigned to patrol Sector Delta, came to radio command. Maintain CAP at Angels 15. Combat air patrol in Sector Delta was essentially guard duty over empty ocean, while other pilots engaged in challenging intercepts over populated areas. Marcus was assigned to patrol an area where no enemy aircraft were expected. The second day brought more complex scenarios involving multiple enemy formations. Marcus watched from his distant patrol sector as his squadron mates engaged in intense dogfights that required extreme maneuvering. Falcon 1-4 is engaged with multiple bandits, Peterson radioed. Heavy G-forces required for successful intercept. Marcus could see the distant contrails of aircraft engaged in high-speed combat. His squadron was fighting for their simulated lives while he flew boring patrol patterns alone. Control. This is Falcon 1-7 requesting permission to assist with a multiple bandit engagement, Marcus radioed. Negative 1-7. Maintain your assigned patrol sector. The message was clear. Marcus wasn't trusted with the demanding missions that real combat would require. He was being treated like a liability rather than an asset. That evening's debriefing was uncomfortable. Admiral Roberts reviewed the day's performance with obvious concern. Pilots, your individual skills are impressive, but your coordination needs improvement. Real enemy aircraft won't give you second chances if you fail to work as a team. She pulled up tactical displays showing the day's engagements. Several times, pilots abandoned their assigned positions to pursue individual targets. This left gaps in our defensive coverage that enemy bombers could exploit. Marcus noticed that his sector showed solid coverage throughout the exercise, but that wasn't mentioned during the debriefing. Tomorrow's scenarios will involve larger enemy formations attacking multiple targets simultaneously. You'll need to balance individual engagements with overall mission requirements. After the official debriefing, Hayes pulled Marcus aside again. Thompson, your patrol performance was satisfactory, but I need to see how you handle real pressure. Tomorrow you'll be assigned to intercept duty over Los Angeles proper. Marcus felt both excitement and anxiety. This was his chance to prove himself, but the pressure was enormous. Sir, I won't disappoint you. I hope not. Admiral Roberts specifically requested that all pilots participate in the high-threat scenarios. Your performance tomorrow will determine whether you stay in the fighter community. The third day began with ominous weather conditions. Heavy clouds covered much of Southern California, creating challenging flying conditions for all pilots. Radar systems had difficulty tracking aircraft through the thick cloud layers. All units, this is control, announced the exercise director. Weather conditions are marginal, but within acceptable limits. Today's scenario involves a massive coordinated attack against Los Angeles International Airport, the Port of Long Beach, and downtown Los Angeles. Marcus strapped into his F-16 with extra care, double-checking every system and reviewing emergency procedures. The weather would make formation flying more difficult and increase the risk of mid-air collisions. Falcon Squadron, your primary responsibility is defending LAX, Hayes commanded over the radio. Enemy aircraft will approach from multiple directions at varying altitudes. Expect heavy resistance. As Marcus taxied toward the runway, he could see other aircraft barely visible through the thick clouds. Weather conditions that would normally cancel training flights were being ignored because of the exercise's importance. Tower, Falcon 1-7 ready for takeoff, he radioed. Falcon 1-7, cleared for takeoff. Visibility is 2 miles with cloud ceiling at 8,000 feet. Good luck, pilot. The takeoff was routine despite the weather, but climbing through the cloud layers was challenging. Marcus relied heavily on his instruments while maintaining formation with his squadron mates. All Falcon units, we have multiple bandits inbound from the northeast, Control announced. Approximately 12 enemy aircraft at various altitudes. Marcus could see the enemy formations on his radar display as numerous blips moving rapidly toward Los Angeles. This was the largest simulated attack they had faced during the exercise. Falcon 1-7, you're assigned to intercept the high-altitude group, Hayes commanded. Angels 25, bearing 040. Finally, Marcus was being given a primary intercept mission instead of patrol duty. He pushed his throttle forward and climbed toward the assigned altitude, breaking through the cloud layer into brilliant sunshine. Above the clouds, visibility was unlimited. Marcus could see enemy aircraft in the distance, their contrails marking their positions against the blue sky. There were 4 F-16s painted in desert camouflage, flying in a tight formation toward Los Angeles. Falcon 1-7 has contact with 4 bandits, bearing 045, range 30 miles, Marcus reported. Roger, 1-7. You're clear to engage. Be advised, these are experienced aggressor pilots flying advanced tactics. Marcus accelerated toward the enemy formation, but they had seen him coming. The lead aircraft immediately turned toward him while the other 3 continued toward Los Angeles. The enemy pilot was skilled and aggressive. He pulled his aircraft into a steep climbing turn that forced Marcus to follow through a demanding high-G maneuver. Marcus felt the familiar weight of gravitational force pressing against his body as he tried to maintain pursuit. 6GS, 7GS. The enemy pilot was testing Marcus's limits immediately, trying to force him into a flight regime where physical strength would determine the outcome. But Marcus had learned from his previous encounters. Instead of trying to match the enemy's high-G turns, he used his superior knowledge of F-16 capabilities to predict the opposing pilot's energy state. The enemy aircraft was bleeding airspeed in its tight turns. Marcus extended his intercept slightly, allowing the bandit to continue its energy-depleting maneuvers while he maintained optimal airspeed. "Come on, American," came an accented voice over the exercise frequency. The aggressor pilots often used psychological tactics to distract their opponents. "Are you afraid to fight like a real pilot?" Marcus ignored the taunt and continued his intercept. When the enemy aircraft completed its high-G turn, it was slower and in a disadvantageous position. Marcus rolled in behind it and achieved a missile lock. Fox 2, Fox 2, Marcus called out, indicating a simulated heat-seeking missile launch. "Bandit down. Kill confirmed. Acknowledge control." Outstanding work, Falcon 1-7. But 3 enemy aircraft were still heading toward Los Angeles, and Marcus was the only pilot in position to intercept them. "Control, 1-7 is engaging the remaining bandits." -1-7. RTB immediately. Your intercept mission is complete. Return to base? Marcus couldn't believe the command. 3 enemy bombers were approaching Los Angeles with no other friendly aircraft in position to stop them. "Control, I have fuel and weapons remaining. Request permission to engage the remaining targets." Negative. All Falcon units are engaged with other threats. You're not cleared for multiple target engagement. Marcus watched helplessly as the 3 enemy aircraft continued toward their target. In a real combat situation, thousands of civilians would die because he was being ordered to abandon the intercept. "Control, this is Falcon 1-7 declaring emergency authority," Marcus radioed. It was a controversial decision that could end his career, but he couldn't allow the simulated attack to succeed. Emergency authority allowed pilots to override ground control in life-threatening situations. Using it during a training exercise was almost unprecedented. 1-7, you are not authorized to declare emergency authority during exercises. Marcus ignored the radio calls and turned toward the approaching enemy formation. He had weapons and fuel available, and no other friendly aircraft were positioned to make the intercept. The 3 enemy aircraft were flying in a loose formation, making them difficult to engage simultaneously. Marcus would need to defeat them one at a time while avoiding their defensive maneuvers. He selected the trailing aircraft first, accelerating to intercept range while maintaining altitude advantage. The enemy pilots saw him coming and immediately turned hard to avoid the attack. 8GS, 9GS. The enemy pilot was pulling every trick in the book, forcing Marcus through maneuvers that pushed his physical limits to the breaking point. Marcus felt his vision start to gray at the edges, a warning sign that he was approaching G-induced loss of consciousness. But his modified breathing technique and months of additional conditioning allowed him to maintain control. The enemy pilot, assuming Marcus couldn't match the extreme maneuver, had exposed himself to attack. Marcus rolled in behind him and achieved another missile lock. Fox 2 banded down, he reported, but there was no acknowledgement from control. 2 enemy aircraft remained, and they were now aware of his presence. They separated, forcing Marcus to choose which target to engage, while leaving the other free to attack Los Angeles. Marcus made a tactical decision that went against everything he had been taught about air combat. Instead of engaging the closer target, he positioned himself between both enemy aircraft and Los Angeles, forcing them to come through him to reach their target. The 2 enemy pilots recognized his strategy and coordinated their attack. They approached from different angles, forcing Marcus to defend against multiple threats simultaneously. This was the scenario that had been used to justify his transfer recommendation. Multiple high-performance aircraft attacking from different directions, requiring extreme physical capabilities and split-second decision-making. Marcus felt the G-forces building as he maneuvered to defend against the first attack. His vision narrowed, but he maintained consciousness and achieved a firing solution on the lead aircraft. Fox 2 banded down. 1 enemy aircraft remained, but it was in perfect position to attack Los Angeles while Marcus recovered from his high-G defensive maneuver. Everything he had trained for came down to this moment. Marcus rolled his aircraft inverted and pulled through a punishing negative-G maneuver that brought him behind the final enemy aircraft. The enemy pilot was skilled and experienced, but he had underestimated Marcus's determination and tactical knowledge. As the bandit lined up for his simulated attack on LAX, Marcus achieved a final missile lock. Fox 2, final bandit down. The exercise frequency was silent for several seconds before control finally responded. All bandits destroyed. Los Angeles successfully defended. Exercise terminated. Marcus had single-handedly defeated 4 experienced aggressor pilots and prevented a simulated attack on one of America's largest cities. But he had also violated direct orders and used unauthorized emergency authority. The debriefing room at Edwards Air Force Base was unusually quiet when Marcus entered. Admiral Roberts stood at the front with a stern expression, while Lieutenant Colonel Hayes sat at a side table reviewing flight data. Other pilots avoided making eye contact as Marcus took his seat. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Roberts began. Today's exercise revealed both exceptional individual performance and serious procedural violations. Marcus felt every eye in the room turned toward him. His unauthorized engagement of multiple enemy aircraft had been the talk of the base for the past 2 hours. Lieutenant Thompson, Roberts continued, your tactical performance was outstanding. 4 confirmed kills against experienced aggressor pilots is remarkable by any standard. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Even Peterson and Morrison looked shocked by the praise. However, Roberts' tone became ice-cold. Your decision to ignore direct orders and declare unauthorized emergency authority was completely unacceptable. The brief moment of validation disappeared. Marcus had known this confrontation was coming, but hearing it officially still hurt. Sir, in a real combat situation, Lieutenant, this was not a real combat situation, Roberts interrupted. This was a training exercise with specific objectives and safety parameters. Your decision to ignore control instructions could have resulted in mid-air collisions or other serious incidents. Hayes stood up from his position at the side table. Admiral, if I may add some context, Lieutenant Thompson has been struggling with physical limitations that affect his G tolerance. His performance today was unexpected, but it doesn't change his fundamental challenges. Marcus felt betrayed. Even after proving himself in the most demanding scenario possible, his commanding officer was still emphasizing his weaknesses. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes raises an important point, Roberts agreed. Outstanding performance in one exercise doesn't necessarily indicate overall combat readiness. The room remained silent as the two senior officers discussed Marcus's fate as if he wasn't present. However, Roberts continued, the tactical intelligence demonstrated today suggests Lieutenant Thompson has capabilities that we haven't fully recognized. She walked over to a large display screen and pulled up the tactical replay of Marcus's engagement. Watch this sequence carefully, she instructed the assembled pilots. Thompson is outnumbered 4-1 against experienced adversaries. Instead of engaging in individual dogfights, he uses superior positioning and energy management to defeat each target systematically. The replay showed Marcus's aircraft moving through a complex series of maneuvers, each one setting up the next engagement while maintaining defensive positioning. Most importantly, notice how he balances individual target engagement with overall mission requirements. He never loses sight of his primary objective, defending Los Angeles. Marcus began to hope that his performance might actually be recognized positively. That said, Roberts added, killing his optimism, his decision to violate orders cannot be overlooked. Military discipline requires adherence to command authority, especially during training operations. The admiral walked back to the front of the room and faced the assembled pilots. Therefore, Lieutenant Thompson will face disciplinary action for his procedural violations. However, his tactical performance warrants further evaluation. Marcus had no idea what that meant for his career. Further evaluation could lead to anything from promotion to court-martial. All pilots are dismissed except for Lieutenant Thompson. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, please remain as well. As the room emptied, Marcus could hear whispered conversations among his fellow pilots. Some seemed impressed by his performance, while others criticized his decision to disobey orders. When only the three officers remained, Admiral Roberts sat down across from Marcus. Lieutenant, I'm going to be direct with you. Your flying today was some of the finest tactical aviation I've seen in 20 years of military service. Marcus felt stunned by the unexpected praise. Your ability to maintain situational awareness while managing multiple threats indicates advanced combat instincts. You demonstrated exactly the kind of decision-making that separates good pilots from great ones. Hayes looked uncomfortable with the Admiral's assessment, but he remained silent. However, Roberts continued, your decision to ignore direct orders concerns me deeply. Combat effectiveness means nothing if you can't follow the chain of command. Ma'am, with respect, in a real combat situation, those enemy aircraft would have killed thousands of civilians if I hadn't engaged them. Lieutenant, you don't get to make that decision unilaterally. Military operations require coordination and discipline. Individual heroics can compromise larger strategic objectives. Marcus realized that no matter how well he performed, his willingness to challenge authority would always be held against him. That said, Roberts surprised him again. Some of history's most effective combat pilots were individuals who knew when to bend rules in service of the mission. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes has recommended your transfer to Transport Command. Based on today's performance, I'm inclined to disagree with that recommendation. Hayes finally spoke up. Admiral, with respect, one exceptional performance doesn't change Thompson's physical limitations. He's never demonstrated this level of capability before. Perhaps, Roberts replied, we haven't given him scenarios that played to his strengths. Today's engagement required tactical thinking more than raw physical capability. She turned back toward Marcus. Lieutenant, I'm postponing your transfer pending completion of an advanced tactical training program. You'll work with our best aggressor pilots to develop your skills further. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. Instead of being punished for his actions, he was being offered advanced training. However, Roberts added, you'll also complete a course on military discipline and command authority. Your tactical skills are valuable, but they must be balanced with proper military conduct. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. As Marcus left the debriefing room, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had avoided transfer to Transport Command, but the advanced training would be incredibly demanding. He would be flying against the military's best pilots in scenarios designed to push him beyond his limits. That evening, Marcus called his parents to share the news. His father was particularly pleased to hear about the tactical recognition. Son, I always told you that intelligence beats brute strength in the long run. You proved that today. Thanks, Dad. But the real test is still ahead. Advanced training means flying against pilots who make today's opponents look easy. Marcus, his mother added, we're proud of you for standing up for what you believed was right. Sometimes doing the right thing requires taking risks. After the call, Marcus spent the evening reviewing tactical manuals and studying advanced air combat techniques. The advanced training program would begin in 2 weeks, and he wanted to be as prepared as possible. The next morning brought unexpected news that would change everything. Marcus was in the squadron-ready room reviewing flight plans when an urgent announcement came over the base communication system. All personnel, this is Base Command with a Priority 1 announcement. Report to designated assembly areas immediately for emergency briefing. Priority 1 announcements were reserved for the most serious situations, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, or military emergencies. Marcus joined hundreds of other personnel streaming toward the base auditorium. The mood was tense as rumors spread about the reason for the emergency assembly. Admiral Roberts took the stage with a grim expression that immediately silenced the assembled crowd. Personnel, I have received word from Pacific Command of a developing international crisis. Approximately 30 minutes ago, radar installations along the West Coast detected multiple aircraft formations approaching U.S. airspace from the Pacific Ocean. A shocked murmur ran through the auditorium. This was not another training exercise. Initial assessment suggests these are hostile military aircraft of unknown origin. Their flight paths indicate targets along the California coast, including Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized the implications. All military installations are now at DEFCON 2. This is not a drill. Real enemy aircraft are approaching American airspace with hostile intent. The auditorium erupted in concerned voices as personnel tried to process the announcement. Fighter squadrons will launch immediately to intercept these threats. All pilots report to your aircraft for immediate scramble. As personnel rushed toward the exits, Marcus realized that everything had changed. The training exercises were over. Real enemy aircraft were approaching Los Angeles, and his squadron would be the first line of defense. In the chaos of the emergency scramble, Marcus ran toward his F-16 while ground crews prepared aircraft for immediate launch. The methodical pace of training flights was replaced by the frantic urgency of actual combat operations. Thompson, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, caught up with him near the aircraft. Are you sure you're ready for this? Real combat is different from exercises. Sir, I'm ready. I hope so, because if you hesitate or fall behind today, people will die. As Marcus strapped into his fighter jet, he could hear radio chatter from other military installations along the coast. The scope of the crisis was becoming clear. This wasn't a limited attack, but a coordinated assault on multiple American cities. All Falcon units, this is Control, came the urgent radio call. 12 enemy aircraft confirmed inbound to Los Angeles. Estimated arrival time, 20 minutes. Marcus started his engines and taxied rapidly toward the runway. Around him, other F-16s were preparing for immediate takeoff in what would become the largest air defense mission in decades. Falcon Squadron, you are cleared for immediate launch, Control commanded. Defend Los Angeles at all costs. As his aircraft accelerated down the runway, Marcus realized that everything he had trained for was about to be tested in actual combat. The pilots who had mocked his physical limitations would soon discover whether intelligence and determination could overcome raw strength when American lives hung in the balance. The war games had become a real war, and Marcus Steady Thompson was about to face the greatest challenge of his life. Marcus pushed his F-16 through the morning sky as Los Angeles sprawled beneath him, its millions of inhabitants completely unaware that enemy aircraft were approaching their city. The radio chatter in his headset was intense as air traffic controllers scrambled to clear civilian aircraft from the area. All Falcon units, this is NORAD Control, came an authoritative voice. We have confirmed 12 hostile aircraft approaching from bearing 270. Altitude varies from 15 to 30,000 feet. These are not training targets. Weapons are free. Repeat, weapons are free. The phrase, weapons are free, sent a chill down Marcus's spine. It meant he was authorized to use live missiles against enemy aircraft, something no American fighter pilot had done over U.S. territory since World War II. Falcon Lead, this is Control. What's your squadron status? Lieutenant Colonel Hayes responded from the lead aircraft. Control, Falcon Squadron has 6 aircraft airborne. We're climbing to intercept altitude and should have visual contact in approximately 8 minutes. Marcus checked his tactical display and saw his squadron mates spread across the sky in defensive formation. For the first time in his career, he was flying alongside pilots who had stopped questioning his abilities. The seriousness of the situation had erased petty rivalries and personal conflicts. Falcon 1-7, this is Control. You're assigned to high-altitude intercept. Angels 28, bearing 285. Marcus acknowledged the command and climbed toward his assigned altitude. The irony wasn't lost on him. After being considered inadequate for challenging missions, he was now being trusted with the defense of America's second-largest city. As he reached 28,000 feet, Marcus could see contrails in the distance, marking the approach of unknown aircraft. His radar display showed multiple contacts, but something was wrong with the formation patterns. Control, this is Falcon 1-7. I'm seeing 12 contacts, but they're not flying in any standard military formation. Request clarification on threat assessment. 1-7, we're tracking the same contacts. Intelligence analysis is ongoing. Maintain intercept course. Marcus studied his radar display more carefully. The incoming aircraft were flying in loose groups of 3 and were approaching from slightly different altitudes and headings. It looked more like multiple uncoordinated attacks than a single organized assault. All Falcon units, this is Control. Be advised, we're receiving conflicting information about the origin of these aircraft. Some may be civilian aircraft in distress. The new information changed everything. If some of the incoming aircraft were civilian planes, Marcus and his squadron mates couldn't simply shoot down everything they encountered. Control, how do we distinguish between hostile aircraft and civilians in distress? Hayes asked the question every pilot was thinking. Falcon Lead, you'll need to make visual identification before engaging any targets. Hostile aircraft are presumed to be military fighters. Civilian aircraft should be obviously different. Visual identification meant getting close enough to see the aircraft clearly, a dangerous proposition if they turn out to be enemy fighters. Falcon 1-7, you have the best position for initial visual identification, Control commanded. Proceed to intercept and report aircraft type. Marcus accelerated toward the nearest group of contacts, 3 aircraft flying in loose formation at 25,000 feet. As he closed the distance, he could see they were sleek, single-engine fighters with angular designs he didn't recognize. Control, Falcon 1-7 has visual contact with 3 unknown military aircraft. They appear to be advanced fighters of foreign design. Roger, 1-7. Are they displaying any national markings? Marcus maneuvered closer, staying outside their visual range while studying the aircraft through his heads-up display. The fighters were painted in a dark gray scheme with no visible national insignia or identification numbers. Negative Control. No visible markings of any kind. Suddenly, one of the unknown fighters turned directly toward Marcus's position. Either they had detected him on radar, or they had been watching for intercepting aircraft. Control. One of the bandits is turning toward me. They know I'm here. Falcon 1-7. Defend yourself as necessary. All Falcon units, we have confirmed hostile aircraft. Engage at will. The enemy fighter was accelerating rapidly toward Marcus's position, and he could see weapons pods mounted under its wings. This was definitely not a civilian aircraft in distress. Marcus turned hard to avoid a head-on engagement while maintaining visual contact with the enemy formation. The lead aircraft followed his turn with impressive agility, forcing Marcus through a high-G maneuver to maintain separation. 6GS, 7GS. The enemy pilot was testing Marcus's limits immediately, just like the aggressor pilots had done during training. But this time the stakes were real. Marcus implemented his modified breathing technique and used his superior knowledge of energy management to counter the enemy's aggressive maneuvering. Instead of trying to match the hostile aircraft's raw performance, he used tactical positioning to gain an advantage. Falcon 17 has missile lock on hostile aircraft, Marcus reported, requesting permission to engage. 17, you are cleared to engage. Fire when ready. Marcus squeezed the missile release trigger, and an AIM-120 AMRAAM departed his aircraft with a brilliant flash. The advanced air-to-air missile tracked toward the enemy fighter with deadly precision. The hostile pilot saw the missile coming and pulled into an extreme evasive maneuver, but the AMRAAM was too fast and accurate. The enemy aircraft disappeared in a ball of flame and debris. Splash 1. Marcus reported. First hostile aircraft destroyed. It was his first real combat kill, but there was no time for reflection. 2 more enemy fighters were approaching his position while additional hostile aircraft continued toward Los Angeles. Falcon 14 is engaged with multiple bandits, Peterson reported over the radio. His usual swagger was replaced by professional urgency. These guys are good, and their aircraft are fast. Marcus turned toward the remaining 2 enemy fighters in his area while monitoring his tactical display. The broader air battle was developing across the entire Los Angeles basin, with his squadron mates engaged in individual dogfights scattered over hundreds of square miles. Control, this is Falcon Lead. I need a tactical picture of the overall situation. How many hostiles are we dealing with? Falcon Lead. We're tracking at least 15 enemy aircraft now. Additional contacts are appearing on long-range radar. This appears to be a coordinated attack with multiple waves. 15 enemy aircraft against 6 F-16s. The odds were getting worse by the minute. The 2 enemy fighters approaching Marcus's position split up, forcing him to choose which target to engage first. They were using advanced tactics, coordinating their attack, to put him in an impossible situation. Marcus made a decision that went against conventional air combat doctrine. Instead of engaging either fighter individually, he positioned himself to force them both through the same piece of airspace, creating an opportunity to engage both targets sequentially. The first enemy pilot took the bait and followed Marcus through a complex series of turns that brought him directly into the path of his wingman. For a brief moment, both hostile aircraft were lined up perfectly. Marcus launched 2 missiles in rapid succession, targeting both enemy fighters simultaneously. The first missile found its target immediately, but the second enemy pilot managed to evade destruction with a spectacular defensive maneuver. Splash 2. Marcus reported. 1 bandit evaded. The surviving enemy fighter was now behind Marcus and maneuvering for a missile shot. Marcus found himself in the defensive position, trying to avoid becoming a target while the hostile pilot pressed his attack. 8 GS, 9 GS. The enemy pilot was forcing Marcus through punishing maneuvers that tested every limit of his physical conditioning. His vision grayed at the edges, but his months of additional training allowed him to maintain consciousness. Falcon 17, this is 1-3, came Morrison's voice over the radio. I'm approaching your position and have visual on your bandit. Morrison's F-16 appeared from above, diving toward the enemy fighter that was pursuing Marcus. The hostile pilot was forced to abandon his attack and defend against the new threat. Thanks for the assist, 1-3. Marcus radioed as he recovered from the high-G defensive maneuvering. Don't mention it, steady. We're all in this together. It was the first time Morrison had used Marcus's call sign without mockery. The tactical situation was changing rapidly as more enemy aircraft appeared on radar. Marcus could see that his squadron was outnumbered and spread thin across the defensive area. All Falcon units, this is Control. We have additional hostile aircraft approaching from the northwest. Estimate 24 enemy fighters total. 24 against 6. The odds were becoming impossible. Control, this is Falcon Lead. We need reinforcements immediately. We can't handle 24 hostiles with 6 aircraft. Falcon Lead. Navy fighters from Miramar are en route, but they won't arrive for another 15 minutes. You need to hold until they get there. Marcus looked at his fuel and weapon status. He had used 2 missiles and had enough fuel for another 30 minutes of combat maneuvering. Around him, His squadron mates were in similar situations. "All Falcon units, form up on me," Hayes commanded. "We're going to concentrate our firepower and take on these bandits systematically." The 6 F-16s came together in a loose formation, presenting a coordinated defense instead of fighting individual engagements. It was a risky strategy that violated standard air combat doctrine, but desperate times required desperate measures. "Here they come," Peterson announced as multiple enemy aircraft appeared on the tactical display. 12 bandits, bearing 040, various altitudes. Marcus could see the enemy formation approaching like a swarm of deadly insects. They were flying advanced fighters with capabilities that matched or exceeded the F-16's performance. "All units, engage at maximum range," Hayes ordered. "Use up your long-range missiles before they get close." 6 AMRAAMs launched simultaneously for the Falcon Squadron aircraft, creating a deadly barrier of advanced air-to-air missiles. The enemy formation scattered to avoid the incoming weapons, but 3 hostile aircraft were destroyed in the initial exchange. Multiple splashes, Morrison reported. 9 bandits remaining. But the surviving enemy fighters were now close enough for visual range combat, and they had the numerical advantage. The next phase of the battle would be decided by individual pilot skill and aircraft performance. Marcus found himself facing 2 enemy fighters while his squadron mates dealt with their own multiple threats. His earlier victories had apparently marked him as a priority target. The enemy pilots were skilled and aggressive, coordinating their attack to put Marcus in an impossible tactical situation. One fighter attacked from the left while the other approached from the right, forcing him to defend against threats from multiple directions. But Marcus had learned something during his months of being underestimated and overlooked. Sometimes the best defense was an unexpected offense. Instead of trying to defend against both attackers, Marcus rolled his aircraft inverted and dove toward the ground, using gravity to increase his speed while forcing both enemy fighters to follow him through a high-G pursuit. The enemy pilots took the bait, following Marcus into a vertical dive that played to his strengths rather than theirs. As they descended through 20,000 feet, Marcus pulled out of the dive with a punishing 9G turn that caught both pursuers off guard. One enemy fighter couldn't match the maneuver and flew past Marcus's position, exposing himself to a perfect missile shot. The second enemy pilot managed to stay with Marcus, but found himself in a turning fight where tactical knowledge mattered more than raw physical strength. Marcus had studied every aspect of air combat throughout his career, compensating for his physical limitations through superior preparation and tactical understanding. The enemy pilot was skilled, but he was flying against someone who had turned warfare into a science. 3 minutes later, both enemy fighters had been destroyed. Marcus climbed back to altitude and checked his tactical display to see how his squadron mates were faring. The picture was mixed. Peterson and Rodriguez had successfully engaged their targets, but were running low on missiles. Hayes was dealing with multiple bandits and calling for assistance. Morrison's aircraft had been damaged by enemy fire and was heading back to base. "Control, this is Falcon 1-7, Marcus radioed. "I've eliminated my assigned threats and am available to assist other units." 1-7, Falcon lead is engaged with 3 bandits at Angels 20, bearing 180. "Provide immediate assistance." Marcus turned toward Hayes' position and could see multiple aircraft engaged in close combat. His commanding officer was outnumbered and fighting for his life against enemy pilots who showed no mercy. As Marcus approached the engagement, he realized this was his chance to prove once and for all that intelligence and determination could overcome any physical limitation. The pilots who had questioned his abilities were now depending on him for their survival. The Guardian of Los Angeles pushed his throttles to maximum power and dove into the final battle that would determine the fate of millions of innocent civilians below.